Hey everybody, I'm Chad with Just Ed Wood. Thanks for joining me for part 2 for this patio build series. As you can see, obviously we're jumping forward in time. The patio is completed and over my head. In the last video, you saw us pour the concrete you see on the ground. We removed a bunch of siding. We bolted a ledger board to the house to attach the roof to. And in this video, we're going to try and stand these columns up and put the beams from column to column. And we might even go as far as getting a few roof rafters up. Thanks for watching and follow along. If you like this sort of thing, please like, subscribe. You can leave any comments below, be it concerns or compliments or questions. I'd love to hear from you. Appreciate you watching and follow along. Thanks. Okay, jumping right in where video 1 left off, starting video 2 of this covered patio build, I needed to install post base anchors into the concrete to stand the 6x6 columns up as posts to hold this roof up. In order to do so, I knew I wanted the columns to be set back 4 inches from the outside edges. So I marked 4 inches in both directions, and then I marked the center where we need to drill the hole to install the post base. So what you're seeing there at the 4-inch mark is where the outside corner of the column is going to be. The next measurement that I'm marking is where the center of the post base anchor is going to be drilled into the concrete. I just did this on both ends, and at the end you'll see me pop a chalk line between them so that all the posts in the middle will be the same distance off the edge of the patio. The chalk line really helps keep things even and keeps them all in a dedicated row. As far as how many columns I went with, there was really no science behind how many columns I chose. I just went with what was visually appealing. I knew that depending on what span table you look at for holding up a roof, there's wildly different methods of figuring out how many columns you need and how far apart they need to be. I wasn't using any of that. I knew that typically you don't want any more than about 8 or 10 feet between your columns with a double 2x8 header. So I went with what was visually appealing. And it turns out I'm at about 8.5, 9 feet between each column. Okay, so it's time to drill some holes in the concrete for the anchor bolts for the post bases. In order to get holes in the concrete, you really need, there's a right tool for every job, and this is not the right one. I'm using my old Ryobi drill. It's brushless, but it is not a hammer drill. Typically to drill into concrete, you need a hammer drill, which impacts the concrete you're drilling into as well as rotates the drill bit. This is not a hammer drill. This is not the right tool for the job, but we're gonna give it a go and see if it works, or see if we're gonna go rent a hammer drill. Well, there we go. So this concrete is really young as far as concrete goes. It's only a few months old. There's some debate out there how quickly concrete cures. So I suspect being only a few months old, it's much easier to drill than, say, 30-year-old concrete. Fortunately, I'm getting away with it without a hammer drill this time. So sorry for the audio, everyone. We're still suffering some microphone issues from the camera and the microphone taking a spill off the ladder in that last video. So apologies in advance for all the audio issues. Okay, so now that I have drilled all of the holes for all of the columns, all of the post base anchors, here's what we're gonna do next. I chose these post base anchors intentionally because they're a little less expensive than some of the decorative models out there, but also these are tall, so they will keep your post up off the concrete so that should any water run by, it'll run underneath and it shouldn't wick up the post, even though he's in a pressure treated 6x6 post. You just set this over the hole you drilled, and then you have to buy these post base anchor bolts separate. And these are a special bolt that fit down into the concrete. They expand when you tighten them so they won't pull out of the concrete, and you'll just need to follow the manufacturer's instructions. I'm reading there that it takes about 60 foot-pounds of torque, so you just use a torque wrench. Once you tighten these down with an impact driver, come back with a torque wrench and just make sure that you've torqued them to the right spec. I don't think you can over tighten these. They might pull out of the ground if you over tighten them. I don't think you'll break a bolt if you over tighten them, but there is a couple things you want to know before you get started, and that is just to put your post base anchor over the hole you drilled and drop your bolt into the hole, and then you want to go ahead and thread the washer and the nut onto the bolt before you start pounding it into the concrete. The tip of the bolt is designed to deflect the blows and mushroom a little bit. And if you don't already have your nut threaded on, you're never going to get it started later. So thread your washer and your nut on first, then you take a hammer and drive it into the concrete, tighten it up with an impact driver, and come back with a torque wrench to make sure everything is at the right spec.
All right, with the post base anchors put in the concrete, we now need to make sure that our columns are 8 feet. And as we've shown in other videos, a lot of times when you buy materials from the big box store, they're not cut square and they're not the correct measurements. And this is the case here. This is 8 feet and ½ inch. So we need 8-foot tall columns, what the plan calls for. So I'm going to cut these down to 8 feet. This one is 8 feet and 3/4 of an inch. So we're going to go ahead and get these cut down to 8 feet. All right, with all of the posts, the 6x6 columns posts cut to 8 feet, I'm now going to notch the top of them for my double beam to nest into the 6x6. So if this were standing upright and the top of my beam, I want my double 2x8, see if I can do this. I want my double 2x8 to nest and rest on this 6x6. So we're gonna get rid of this. And what's going to be left is a place for my double 2x8 beam to rest on the 6x6s. Now my skill saw is only capable of cutting 2 1/4 inches deep. This is obviously the same width as two 2x8s, which is 3 inches deep, and then 7 1/4 inches tall. So I'm going to have to finish these cuts with the reciprocating saw also. But here we go. So from here, you see my two 2x8s will nest if this were standing upright in this orientation.
While this clip winds down, I got the pockets cut in the rest columns, and I cannot recommend the Ryobi Sawzall. This is my second one.
Well, as our good friend Uncle Bumble might say, she let the smoke out. I don't know if y'all can see that or not, but it's definitely done for. All right, with the post base anchors, I don't know why that's so difficult for me to say. With the post base anchors in the ground, time to set the posts. So let's see how this goes. My plan is to just sort of set a couple of posts off to the side, this way, and screw them in place once I get the post level. right, first column's up. Not exactly, but.
Looking back at how this went, this process went pretty smooth actually, with the temporary braces in close proximity to the column that I'm going to stand up. I mean, the 6x6s are heavy and they're hard to move around, sure, but not a lot of rocket science here. But like any other building project, as long as you're starting off square and plumb and level, and you spend a minute on each column making sure that it's square, plumb, and level, you can put the temporaries in place and it'll pretty much stay put until we get the beams in on top of them and the roof built above that. Step in the process is to get these 2x8s. I can't even tell where I am in here. Hi. All right. Now that all of our posts are standing up, the next step in the process is to raise the double 2x8 header, and I'm going to put it in these pockets I've cut in the tops of the posts. And once they're in place, I'm going to drill through the top of the post and the beam and lag bolt them together. So let's get these in place. Okay, with the first double 2x8 tin set in the pocket that I cut in the top of the post, my intention is to carriage bolt these together. So I want the smooth part of the head of the bolt to be on the outside, and I'm going to countersink the nut and the washer on the inside. So this, I bought bolts that are 5.5 inches long, which is the total depth of this configuration, and then I'm going to countersink a washer and a nut on the backside. So to get started, I'm going to mark some line. Okay. And once I get it where I want it, I'll make a mark on my drill bit. I need a bigger spade bit. That's not good. All right, let that be a lesson to you. What I did here was drill a hole that's too small for my washer. So I want to bury the washer and the nut flush. And in order to do so, I have to drill a hole to mount them in there. I drilled the hole too small. Unfortunately, with paddle bits, they have a center bore that it guides off of. So to overcome that, I've cut a correct size hole in this piece of wood. I'm going to mount it in place and try to use it to cut the right size hole. We'll see what happens. See how we did.
That's the finish I was looking for right there.
I think now is probably a good time to call it quits for this video. Please like, subscribe, follow, leave any comments, questions, or compliments below. If you've watched it this far, or if you've watched any of my videos at all, I sincerely appreciate you following along. Be sure to tune in for the next episode of watching a guy on YouTube muddle through roof rafters. Thanks.